So thank you. So Keith is incredible, but from now on out, I'm going to refer to him as my opening act. I'm high tech, just like Keith. Wrote down my notes. I do not have slides. Here to talk to you today about innovation. As Keith said, innovation is important for our country, not only because of our economic needs. It's about growth. It's about solving world problems, but also for national security. When I came into my role in U.S. government, I thought I was going to be creative and think about how to bring more people into the innovation ecosystem. And so I worked on that. We came up with a national strategy on inclusive innovation. We rolled out numerous policies with the Department of Commerce focused on how do we break down barriers so that we can be more innovative as a country. But when I traveled the world, I realized that every other country is focusing on this as well. Every other one. I will say China is focused on it from a leadership perspective, from an innovation and leadership perspective. The entire global South, Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, they are focused on it more from an economic competitiveness perspective, on building communities and making sure all of their people are supported. So today, I'm going to talk to you on three things. One, international, to give you a flavor of what we're seeing on the international landscape. Two, national. And three, local. And when I think about local, I think about your organizations as well. Now, I will say, I know this summit is about democratizing innovation, democratizing AI. That is something that I worked on across government. We worked on making sure that everybody had access to data and compute. That's still a really important initiative. And although I'm not going to have a separate category on inclusion, to me, it's critically important for everything we do to lead as a country and everything we do to lead as an organization. And just to give you an idea on that, if we were to have parity with the number of women inventors compared to the number of men inventors, so not taking away from any of the men inventors, but increasing the participation of women inventors, our patenting would increase by 4x. In addition to that, our economy would grow by $1 trillion. And that's just by bringing women into the fold. One of the initiatives that I started when I came into government was more funding to make sure that all the innovations coming from everyone across the country could be patented. Because if you don't patent an invention, you can't bring it to fruition because somebody will take it or you won't be able to get the investment. And when I looked at the statistics of the impact we were having, so right now, the percent of women on US patents is 12%. When we opened up the doors and provided support, that number jumped to 43%. 43%. Now, we don't track numbers across demographics, generally in the population when it comes to patenting, but that number when it came to African Americans was 20%. So you can tell the difference in actually getting out there and supporting communities. So let's talk about policy, international. Why does international matter? International matters for two reasons. One, AI does not have borders. So you need to think about international policy when you think about the work you do in AI, whether you're developing in the stack or whether you have a company that's rapidly, hopefully, using AI for innovation. When we talk about international, the leader in terms of policy right now is the EU, with the EU AI Act. It's something everybody needs to be aware of. It has extraterritoriality, which means that it impacts you no matter what you're doing in AI and no matter where you are. But when we think about international, we also think about the countries that Keith mentioned. For example, Singapore. A lot of your companies came and spoke to me when I was in government and said, we're worried about Singapore. We're worried about Singapore because at the time, Singapore was creating policy that AI could train behind a paywall. Because Singapore doesn't have a big news industry, a big movie industry. There is no Hollywood in Singapore. All they wanted to do was lead on AI. So their policies were very binary in terms of ensuring that they would have policies that would attract all the best to come and innovate in Singapore. So that's what we're seeing on the international landscape. Now, of course, we're part of that international landscape. The US does not regulate the way EU does, and we believe in deregulation, generally speaking. So if you think about the US landscape, there is no omnibus US regulation around AI. So are you off the hook? No. Unfortunately, or fortunately, when there is no US regulation, for example, we don't have one on data and privacy. The EU does, we do not. When you don't have that, what happens? The states lean in. And that's what's happening now. Just in 2025 alone, there have been 1,000 bills or AI initiatives announced across our 50 states. Every single one of our states is leaning into this space. California, always first and foremost with coming up with legislation. And I will say it's something you need to track. One of the good things is California usually is kind of an omnibus framework that if you satisfy California, you usually satisfy all the rest of the states. Also, what we think about when we think about US policy, we need to think not just about the policy around AI. When we think about AI innovation policy, we need to think more broadly. And I'm just going to give you one example of that. There was a panel right after Keith's where I heard people talk about being immigrants, right? So the immigration population in the United States in 2012 contributed to 40% of our US patents. 40%. And patents are often used as a surrogate for innovation to show how fast we're innovating, who's contributing to innovation. And that 20% was up from 22% in 2020, so from 2020 to 2012. We put out a study, actually I'd left the PTO by then, it was put out by the USPTO in January of 2025, you can pull it up on the website, on the contributions of immigrants to innovation. So when we think about innovation policy in the United States, we not only have to think about what's coming out from the states, a lot of which is not pro-innovation strategy or legislation per se, it's more about how do we do it in a way that's safe for everyone. But we also have to think about other policies like immigration policies, and I could go on and on, that also will impact how successful we are as companies and how successful we are as a nation in innovating. So let me turn to local. In terms of local, it's all about a few things. One, we need to create the right culture around AI. This is something I spoke to the Secretary of Commerce about, the last one, Gina Raimondo, numerous times. That oftentimes as a government, we're worried about what may go wrong. But we really need to be proactive about making sure that we're creating cultures and we're creating the dynamics so that we can innovate more using AI as a country, as a company. Keith had mentioned President Trump's order, very pro-innovation. In terms of how we create those cultures, I think we can learn a lot from what we've done on the intellectual property side. Because on the intellectual property side, as I said, we in the US and in other countries, we're working hard to expand the innovation economy. And in order to do that, we had to identify what the barriers were to innovation. Where were people getting stopped? And I'll give you an example that I think you can think about in terms of how we need to think about this going forward. So the example that I have is when I came to the agency and somebody applied for a US patent, their very first substantive communication from the United States Patent and Trademark Office was a rejection, right? So we put our minds to it and thought, geez, that's not very friendly. It's not very welcoming. It doesn't make you feel like you're supported and the government wants to give you a grant. So I asked our chief economic officer to run an analysis. And I said, okay, we can't track things by where people are from. We can't track things by certain demographics, but we can generally track things by gender based on names. So I said, please go and find out if women, again, only 12% of patenting is women, so There's challenges to bringing them to actually innovate and then patent in the first place. But are they opting out at a higher rate than men? Yes, and dramatically so. Dramatically so. Because when they got that rejection, demographically, women would interpret it as a rejection, not as an opportunity to engage the office. So what we did was we created welcome letters. And the first welcome letter had my picture on it and my deputy director's picture. And the person I chose for a deputy director happened to be a black man. And then when the second communication came out, it came from the person I chose to lead our entire patents organization of 9,000 people, who happened to be an Asian American woman. And so both with what we offered in terms of this is what this means, we want to help you, and in terms of all the resources, dramatically improved that opt-out rate. And I mention this because those are the creative types of things we need to think about when it comes to AI. We need to think about how do we create the right environments in our organizations so that women and people who are not going to participate at the same rates as those who are not diverse are equally involved in the development of AI, equally involved in using AI for innovation. And when we think about that, we need to think about those barriers. The other thing I will say, and there's been studies done on this, women thrive through collaboration. Through collaboration, not through competition. And this is wired into our brains. All the happy juices get flowing with men when they compete. And this is, with women, all the happy juices get flowing when they collaborate. So, and you heard Keith say something about the one-person startup, right? AI is a solo sport. Oftentimes when you're using AI, I mean, we all use it now, right? You're there prompting. You're not in a group. You're not collaborating. You're not thinking about it. You're just off on your own. If we don't create those collaborative environments, we will not see women and certain other demographics participating at the same rate. We also need to make sure that we have all the right support systems. Because women, because they don't need more help. Some people misinterpret the statistics. It's that they want to work with other people. So, for example, when I was at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, we had extra help for people who were filing a patent on their own. So to get a patent, you can do it all by yourself, or you can hire a lawyer. So we said, okay, if people do it by themselves, let's provide additional support and see if we can't get the patenting rates up from those that are acting solo. In doing so, the percent of people actually getting a patent from the system increased dramatically, both men and women. But there was a 15% difference between the increase in women patenting compared to the increase in men. And somebody said, oh, great, they just need more help then. No, they don't need more help, but just having somebody that they could collaborate with really made the difference. So when we think about AI within our organizations, we need to think about that. Not just here are the tools, go watch a video all by yourself. That's not going to be enough to make sure that we are innovating in a way that's going to be most effective to our organizations. So for the last part of this, I'm going to give you a little public service announcement. I've leaned in on AI policy forever, and I'm so grateful to be here and still working on AI policy. But we also have to think about protecting that. And so when you are doing work in your organizations, you need to think about a few things. Number one, people want to steal your innovation. Countries, I won't name them, certain countries actively target your organizations. They even more actively target startups. Why do they more actively target startups? Because you're not probably NIST compliant when it comes to your cybersecurity. You don't have the money. We in government created a program, I did it with the FBI, to help startups learn how to be cyber compliant without having to pay the money to be NIST compliant. They target your startups through cyber breaches. So please, all of the innovation that you're doing, make sure that you're secure on a cyber perspective. The other way they target your organizations, especially startups, is they come in as investors, right? They take a meeting with you. And if you haven't protected your innovation through patenting or otherwise, and you disclose, they're going to steal your idea and take it home with them. The other thing they do is they'll give you a little bit of investment. You're hungry, it's early. They give you a little bit of investment. Now they technically own part of you and all of your innovation. So you need to think about that. The other thing you need to think about is patenting. I know we all believe in open source. It's a really, really great thing. But if you don't patent, we're not going to be able to innovate at the pace that we would normally innovate at. And I'll give you an example, because I went across government to try and get more patenting, and I heard all the reasons why people were hesitant to. I will say, all of you who got a COVID vaccine, you would not have got it when you wanted, as early as you did, if there weren't patents, if mRNA had not been patented. If the companies that were contributing to the vaccine couldn't determine what each of them owned, because they would be afraid to share. So sharing and patenting are not antithetical. So please make sure you patent. And I will say on that, you can patent both what's in the stack and your innovations. I came up with policy when I was in government that said, you just have to have a human involved. Now, the human has to do something besides set AI loose on the internet and say, come up with every problem, come up with every solution. You have to do more than that. So I would suggest that you document what you do so it's not challenged later. But so great to be here. Wanted to give you just a quick glimpse of the landscape on policy. I will say it's up to all of us to shape it. I'll leave you with that final thought. You heard about Keith's role in government. That committee still exists. You can get involved in government. You can sit on a committee. Government wants to hear from you more than they want to hear from the team that you've hired to go represent you in government. They want to hear how we can be the best when it comes to innovation, and the government will shape policy around that. Last point, on that policy, make sure that not only are we shaping it, but we're shaping the interpretation of it. Because those charged across our country on interpreting that legislation and determining your futures don't know about AI, and they don't know what that legislation means. I've been hired as an advocate to go in and help shape that, because people said if we just have regulators, they'll just interpret. We need someone to go in there and shape it and to explain why it needs to be interpreted in a certain way that makes sure that we support US innovation everywhere. So thank you and have a wonderful conference.